guess we should frame it as it should be a conversation between us, shouldn't it? It's not. It shouldn't be us addressing an audience, should it? I don't know. What do you think? Both?
That's a good
I
question.
think it's kind of part of the thing that is now people want to listen to live conversations.
Yeah.
Because there's a sense where if you're listening to somebody speak to you, it feels more produced. As opposed to, like, there's a live conversation between the three of us. We're speaking to each other. I think actually people are right now prefer to listen to that.
Yeah. Rather
because
than
things
lecture.
emerge more so than if the three of us have, someone else in mind and we're always thinking about how it sounds for so and so. I think that tends to block things emerging more. I don't know, could be wrong.
Yeah. So it's it seems more natural just to have it as a conversation.
Yeah.
I like an actual happening conversation that's alive.
Yeah.
In some way. And
It's
I guess
like,
that's
I don't know if you guys saw that movie Free Solo with the guy who climbed El Capitan.
Oh, no, I haven't
And he
watched
was
that.
saying how, he was like, he climbed like 1,000 meters, like straight up rock face. But he was saying how, I mean, he's like the best free climber in the world. But he was saying how just having a camera on him made it a different thing.
Yeah.
Because in a sense, it became a performance.
Right.
Sorry, someone's just breaking. Yeah. Okay. So, in terms of what we're after, then I suppose we're trying to investigate some things about football and try and speak to some interesting people about football, broadly speaking. Right.
Yeah, and
and
multidisciplinary approach.
That's right. That's right. Seeing it from multiple perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
What multiple perspectives can do for the game and how that can impact our coaching and our understanding of football, maybe.
Right. And interesting thing is, because we are coaches, right? So we have this kind of practitioner aspect to it, which and I suppose that is the end goal, is to try and, if there are some interesting theoretical things, kind of inform the way we coach, I guess.
How accurate would you guys say it is to say that we're looking at the ontology of the game? You guys like that metaphor? Or?
Yeah,
it fits with Heidegger's idea of a regional ontology.
Yeah, and it's just, I would kind of describe it as a shift from, metaphysics or an epistemology of the game to more an ontology of the game. Because a lot of how I imagine it is that I'm trying to go from thinking about the game inside of the game in the sense of just purely kind of these X's and O's and like tactics and the way that games usually understood in terms of all these things that are almost contained within, and trying to think, well, how does that connect into the bigger picture? That's kind of the implicit base that it's kind of like resting on.
Yeah, because I think you've mentioned this a few times, David. And I think I was thinking about it, and like considering the actual nature of what football is, right? What is it? Because it's not static, like at all. It's completely it's evolving all the time, and it changes. And if then the question is, if this thing is a changing thing and it's never static, then how does that inform the way we try and solve problems within it? And I think that's an interesting way to try and, like you say, step back from what our own understanding of football is, and try and see it in from as broad a perspective as possible, and see what is happening when it is taking in all these different aspects, mashing them all up in itself, and then producing them back out in different weird ways. And it can be difficult to see those things when you're inside sometimes quite a narrow perspective, whether it's a national one club.
I really liked what you said with the David Foster Wallace thing with the "This Is Water." That's, I think, for me, gets pretty close to it. Where we've been swimming in this game, and we're kind of trying to say, what is the water?
Yeah, that one really is, because it's such a simple way of putting it. And but that, I mean, when I read that or listened to when he said that, I was like, man, that's so clear, right? It's a great one. Such a clear way of describing this problem of, you can't see the thing that you're in, right? And people say, oh, you have to think outside the box, but you have to realize you're in a box first before you can step outside of it. Right? This is the thing. And hopefully through some of these conversations, we might be able to, get in a higher resolution idea of what we're actually dealing with here.
Yeah,
and to take all of these perspectives a bit more seriously, maybe to have a conversation about them. It seems, especially in today's age, everything goes very quickly, and people are discounted, and theories are thrown out without really examining them. So I think we want to take a deeper look at some of these ideas,
and especially people who are not within what would typically be considered like football expertise. Yeah,
right.
So the idea that somebody who is, a philosopher, anthropologist, whatever it may be, could have a perspective that could be very enlightening, interesting, valid, whatever criteria you want to use.
Yeah, being open to that.
Yeah.
And I think it might be interesting as well at this time where analytics and data are coming ever more to the fore, which is fine. It's going to happen. But then we also shouldn't forget that football is a human endeavor, right? It's a human, a group of human beings coming together to try and solve some problem, achieve some goal. And certainly things like anthropology, philosophy, all these types of things, these different domains and areas are going to inform, because it's a human. The human is at the center, right? So just trying to have as broad a palette when you're thinking about what is to be human is it should be useful, right?
And my sense is that usually the analytics come along at the point where the parameters that people imagine the game to exist within have gotten quite rigid. So once people all start to converge onto some kind of a similar conception of the game, then it starts to become more formalized and, chopped up analytically. And I think that's probably the time when we most need somebody to just push those parameters back and say, well, why are we looking at it like this?
Shock your thinking.
Exactly. Violent shock to thought.
I think, and that when you say that, it sounds again, when you say it's when things are becoming narrow, it's becoming static and rigid, and they're solving problems in a static space, and they're designing their logics within that fixed conception of whatever the view of football is. You design the system and then you kind of solve problems within it, right? It's like the thing of
that's Thomas Kuhn, isn't it?
Yeah. You hide the trinket behind the hedge and then congratulate yourself when you find it, right?
Wittgenstein, right? Letting flies out of fly bottles,
It is, but it's that's like, for me, that's how I imagine, like, Thomas Kuhn, and he wrote Structure of Scientific Revolutions. It's like, you have a reigning paradigm and everybody kind of does their bit on that, and you have Newtonian physics, and then people have, they go so far in that, and then eventually someone comes along, it's like, wait, hold on. At the level of these fundamental axioms, we can shift something, and then you just start back from square one.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult thing. I don't know. That's part of just that whole paradigm shift. There's a lot of people who actually are quite good at working within an existing paradigm. Usually those are the analytic people. Those are, probably a lot of people who do very well in coaching even. They kind of get what's going on in the game. They see how the game's being played and thought of. And they, maybe they add a little piece to it. Maybe they kind of optimize something that wasn't fully developed. But I don't know if any one person can really, make that paradigm shift happen, or if that's just part of the zeitgeist. But my sense is that we're kind of there, and I don't know if it's something that we're making it happen. But I think we would probably agree that it is in the process of happening.
Like, are you asking if you can get outside of your own history or your own, zeitgeist?
Yeah,
maybe?
somewhat. But I think that, well, I mean, in that sense, like, I think Foucault kind of talks about this kind of thing. But when you get to a point where sometimes things that were always taken for granted become rendered just unusual. And I know for me, I've been having that feeling about the game where it's just like, why do we do this? Like, what is it? it's just something that I've done, my whole entire life has just become kind of like bizarre and like fascinating in like an interesting way. But it's not like I chose that. It just kind of started to happen.
Yeah, and I think there's also it doesn't seem to have been explored a huge amount. This idea of taking as many different perspectives, domains, areas of interest, and trying to see how they might sit together instead of playing against each other, and instead of having contradictions and dichotomies, we'd rather try to bring in, again, from all these different fields and see these perspectives and see if they can complement each other in some way.
And would it be like giving our coaches like a pragmatic toolbox? So you have all these different ideas and they could be considered certain tools, and then, okay, now which ones are we going to use at which times?
Yeah, right. So sometimes straight logic, rationality, a more scientific approach could be the right way to do it. Others might be a far more intuitive feeling, perspective approach. Sometimes you might draw on from art, from philosophy, in terms of how you're structuring your sessions, or even structuring your relationships with other people. And exactly. I don't think there's been anyone really who's trying to use as much of the knowledge and wisdom that we have, right? As humans, we've got a lot of it in all different kinds of spaces. And why not try and integrate all of these things into, because football seems to be able to, what would you say, actually it acts well as a container for all of these things.
Well, you said it earlier, it's a human starting point, and all of these wisdoms are also a human starting point. So maybe that's what they all have in common.
And just there's some interesting areas we've talked about. Okay, straight up philosophy. We could talk about human collective intelligences, which is another area.
Complex systems
coming up. Flow, David. I think you've spoken about that quite a few times.
Yep.
And I mean, that's just to name a few of these areas that might be worth delving into.
Yeah, and I think also something of an evolutionary perspective, like why do we do this? Because people put a lot of time and energy, and in the current world system, there's a lot of money that follows it around as well. So that's probably a sign that there's something going on.
Anthropologically as well, in terms of, how are you going to set something up within your current context? Because that's what we spoke a little bit about last time. And, you'd have to know the culture you're in. So maybe some anthropological understanding of where you're at.
Yeah. But I think as much as I think it would be interesting to get, eventually some kind of a high level player on, but I'd like to kind of push back against the tendency that the best people to understand a global phenomenon are the people who have been immersed in it. Because that's, I think, usually when people, you see straight away, anybody who's been a former player successfully is going to be able to coach, and people are going to look to them to see what is the game. If you've played in the World Cup, then everyone wants to know, well, what is it? And I think that's definitely a valid perspective, but it's kind of the one that I think people have just always taken for granted as being the only one, as opposed to, and I think that's where you see someone like Jose Mourinho, maybe exploit that, having that outside perspective a little more.
Yeah, and the person who teaches him is a professor at the University of Porto, right? So that's also curious to me. Like, he didn't really play at a high level, and he gets his education from an academic. So
yeah, from conversations I've had, Mourinho takes the complexity sciences side of it very seriously. That apparently he's a scholar. Like, he studies the game as a phenomenon, I think.
I haven't read, I don't know if any of Vito Fradde's work is in English, maybe it is, but I haven't read any of it directly. But from what I've heard about him, he's quite a teacher also. So you could imagine Mourinho had a good education.
Yeah.
And I think, again, as we go through these conversations, that hopefully these interesting things might happen during them. It's just always trying to remain grounded in trying to ground the theory in some kind of practical use, because these things can, I'm probably guilty of it, as well, I'm sure I am, you go off into these abstractions, right, and you're putting layer upon layer of theory, right, and abstract concept, and it's all very nice, right, and you can all pat each other on the back and go, hey, that was cool. But then it's like, okay, does it actually, how does it affect the way we actually behave as coaches, as practitioners? Football being a game that's played by the body, right? So a physical game. So there's got to be that link between them, which sometimes I think can get strained sometimes.
Well, I think
probably will do.
Where I imagine that oscillation between the contraction and relaxation, because if it's working for you, then, good on you, just kind of keep banging away. But I think most people, whether they're playing or coaching, they get to a point where what they've been doing stops working, and you get the sense that you're going to need some type of a constructive deconstruction or an addition by subtraction where you're stepping back. Because I feel, my sense is there's a lot of resources, that will help you add information. But I think we're kind of trying to do something where, there's other people, I'm sure there's other people who understand the X's and O's better than us.
Sure.
But,
sure,
we're trying to say, like, well, before all that, if, let's say, your assumptions within those kind of types of inquiry maybe are limiting you, then what you need is a relaxation phase.
And
so I think it is still practical, I think. You need something to kind of wipe the slate clean, and then you start again.
Yeah, and in terms of that relaxation being this freer space to try new things, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than
that's been well established in flow and creativity kind of sciences, that there's always some kind of a process where you have contraction and relaxation. Einstein used to go out and look at the clouds or whatever, but something where you let go. So I think
it can't be too intense all the time.
And also in that, then there is movement, because there is always a movement. So just even that very, very one word, movement, of this idea of everything constant flow and flux is probably, well, for me anyway, is a useful starting point to try and, when you're trying to consider the problem that you're trying, or the inquiry, let's say, because this idea that everything is moving, it's means then you're not going to try. Right, exactly. And you're not going to then start trying to solve fixed, rigid problems with limited tools, right? You might use them a bit, but you're always aware that things aren't clear and it's not obvious where things, the causality lies between things. So you're going to try and get a feeling for it by using different types of knowing, I suppose, would be the idea there. And maybe it's exploring rather than just this scientific propositional knowing of I know that this is the case. There's other ways of knowing things. You can feel things. You can intuit things. And it's maybe trying to bring those more into play as well.
Yeah,
definitely.
And that this is a game that's embedded very deeply within traditional and cultural practices. It's a part of people's families. It's a part of people's culture and their whole way of life.
Yeah, so and the human being plays it. The person with a brain and with a particular way of thinking and with a particular upbringing, and then they have to interact with 11 other human beings who play, or 10 other human beings who play it. So,
and you also are always you always wake up in the middle of the game. Much like language, like you don't actually start from zero. It's like you wake up and the game's already going on, and you're kind of trying to piece it together from the middle. Like you're late to the party.
You're throwing.
Yeah, thrown.
I think that, and hopefully, there will be people find them interesting. These these inquiries interesting, and
at the end of the day, I find it interesting.
I'll entertain myself. So
yeah, I think we all enjoy it, right? We all find it interesting enough to do it. So, and I suppose the idea of sharing the content is that other people might also, which would be cool, because we're talking about, you know, collectives here and bringing people together and working different perspectives. So the more the merrier, right?
And those other people who might find it interesting, you know, maybe they want to also chat, which is, like you say, collaborating, opening it up, you know, making a bigger conversation with more people. I think that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's why I really like that idea of the infinite game, where, you know, part of this conversation is just to continue the conversation and to grow the conversation. I don't know that we're thinking that we're going to end somewhere.
No,
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're almost providing or not providing, but coming at this from the view that the end of history is not a particularly sufficient way of looking at things.
Yeah.
So the end of anything really implies that you have this idea of that it's finite and complete, and total. So
well, yeah, Rorty talks a lot about that in Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity. Like, we don't have a final vocabulary. We've got to keep the conversation going, and maybe you should be ironic with respect to your own positions.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's going to be fun. So I guess we'll see.
Do we want to talk at all about our backgrounds? Because we throw in a lot of references that the three of us get. Or just let it come out.
Yeah, I think just let it go.
I think it's suffice that say we're all football coaches.
Football coaches, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think it, and I think things will come out about, you know, what kind of football.
But I guess I would say, you know, for anybody listening who may be thinking about having a chat with us, you know, if you don't know some specific thinker that maybe one of us references, don't worry about it, because we're just kind of pulling from all over.
Yeah.
And we're pretty certain that whoever we talk to probably would have understanding of people that we haven't read or understood.
And I think also as well, if there are, one of the things I like about the conversations is if for example you bring out a reference or a book or a person, individual that I've never heard of, then that's cool, because then I can say, oh, who's that, and then I can go and check it out myself. I can investigate it. So it's also that idea of you're learning from the people you're speaking with, and certainly for me anyway, I don't feel I'm not going to get upset if I don't or if it's a name I'm not familiar with. That's a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. So then that means, all right, cool, that's another one I can go check out, and I think we'll always try and explain things, hopefully, in a way that's clear without just throwing names around.
Yeah, I think what I meant to say is, like, there's no prerequisite canon of things to join the conversation. You know, it's just a 100%.
I know this is also a personal struggle too, and something that, you know, I'll try and improve on. But yeah, rather than just saying a name, think about the idea and explain the idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if it's a good concept, usually it's relevant whether you know the thinker or not, anyways.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Anyone?
I think that's a pretty good intro.
We could probably put something together from that, I think.
Yeah.
And like I said, it might even just be 10 minutes or something, or 15 minutes. How long was that?
It's probably 23 minutes altogether, but probably 20 minutes, which is probably, I think, pretty decent.
Yeah. And I'll just have a go at editing that. And then we could. Have you got anything? Have you been in contact with anyone about another episode, another conversation?
Yeah, Owen Southgate said he'd do one.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys know him. He's a real cool guy. He was a coach mentor for the FA, and then he started this organization called NIFA, National Youth Football Association in Sweden.
Right.
But he does a lot. He works with like a lot of nonprofits and stuff as well.
Okay.
He sounds interesting.
I think he'd be interesting. He's like pretty well versed on the ecological stuff, but I think he probably transcends that a little bit as well.
Okay, so
he's got pretty practical.
Should we try to get going with him maybe next weekend, or would that be too soon?
Yeah. Let me reach out to him and see.
Yeah.
I know he's pretty busy. He told me he'd come on.
Yeah, nice. And I've mentioned it to John McKenzie, who I think would be a good guest.
Because
he'd be awesome. He's my favorite football journalist.
Should I end the recording just so that you don't have to clip it all out?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's right.
I think John's a theologian, right?
Yeah, he's